Well, good morning. It is a unique treat to stand in front of you this morning and open the Word of God with you. I'd like to open with a little story. When I was in my 20s, I lived with a family down in Los Angeles, Bruce and Yvonne. She was affectionately known to me. She was so sweet. Every Sunday we would get together and she would cook a big pot of spaghetti and invite her friends and anybody else from church who was in need of a family. And there she would sit around her table, and she would laugh and joke. She would do all these hospitable things for her guests who came into her home. Due to her illness and the age that she had achieved, she was no longer able to go out and serve in your customary ways of food pantries and so forth. But her table was one of her greatest tools for service. And I was fortunate enough to sit around it with her and be blessed. And in her service of hospitality, I saw a woman who, like our story today, Martha, walked a journey with Jesus, and yet was still able to open her home. I do want to give a couple points of clarity as we get into our study. It's easy to read this story and pit Martha versus Mary, as you will soon find out. And by no means is that my intention. I hope that we would be able to examine Martha, and somewhere in there, male or female, that we would be able to identify the Martha within us as we are on our journey. Let's go ahead and jump into our passage in Luke. Luke 10, 38 through 42. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to get up. Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, "You are worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her." Martha demonstrates a Jewish custom just recently described coming from Genesis 18. The hospitality, the custom of opening one's home, providing a meal. Like it was beautifully described, can you imagine the amount of wheat needed for 3 travelers? 36 some pounds. Imagine how much more so for Jesus and his disciples to provide to provide bread, let alone a meal, and the extensive preparation that went into it. If you are like me, maybe you've hosted somebody in your home and you can relate. Martha, she's dutiful. She's compassionate. She sees Jesus with his disciples, and she's generous. She opens up her home. She knew the amount of work that would be required, the bread, the fixings. If Abraham used what he used, surely she could put something together. If you've opened your home to somebody, you can probably relate to the cultural perspective of questions that flew through Martha's head. Will I have enough food? Did Mary get everything I asked her to get from the market? Did I measure the ingredients correctly? Are the guests comfortable? Do they have enough water? Did Mary clean up the room? Did she get Jesus an extra cushion? I can only imagine the thoughts of hospitality running through her head that she had not yet prepared. Her sister, on the other hand, chose a different path. She sat before Jesus, listening to every word he would say. The long-standing tradition of rabbis sitting and listening. Once you were a disciple of a rabbi, you would sit in their presence and to even show greater respect at their feet. You would hang on to every word. The disciple was what would be considered yoked. They would be memorizing everything that the rabbi had to say, adopting his understanding of Scripture, imitating his ministry, and even taking his teachings and passing it on to others. I mean, this is where Matthew in 11:28 through 30 gets the phrase, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your soul. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Mary sat at Jesus' feet. She took his yoke upon her. And I could only imagine the feeling, the cultural norms that were being broken at this time when Mary chose to do this. I mean, this is against customs. This is against tradition. If you're a woman, I hate to say it, but at this time, this was not your place. Sitting before the rabbi, studying, learning from him, would not have been a place for a woman. The Rabbi Eleazar in the Mishnah, a collection of teachings by a famous rabbi around that time, even went on to say in Sota 3:4, anyone who is teaching his daughter Torah is teaching her frivolity, which means silliness or lacking seriousness or empty. For a woman to sit and be taught at this particular time, especially by a rabbi, it was looked down upon. And I could only imagine in Martha's mind, here she stands in the kitchen going through all the preparations, feeling alone. And yet, there's Mary sitting out of custom, out of tradition. What is Mary doing? I thought she'd be in here by now. Who does she think she is? That's not her place. Does she know where she belongs? Doesn't she see what's expected from her? She is unfit. Martha, being overwhelmed by the responsibilities and tasks at hand, eventually musters up the courage in verse 40 to approach Jesus. Her response in verse 40 is, but Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Martha wasn't wrong in her service. In fact, her hospitality was good and honorable. It would have been praised. But somehow along the way, the good act consumed her mind. She became indignant, angry, and disappointed. Doesn't Jesus know how I feel? Maybe you have prayed a similar prayer as Martha, as I have. I've picked a few out from my life that I can think of, and excuse my wife in case I say anything over the top. Lord, my kids will not keep the house clean. Don't they see how much work it causes me? Or maybe my wife. Lord, my parents won't come along and be present. Don't they see how overwhelmed I am? Lord, my spouse, I won't finish that one. And lastly, just a simple, Lord, don't you care? Tell them. My heart breaks because how many times have I stood in the situation like Martha and in indignation and disappointment said these words. Now, just a point to clarify, we're not saying that Mary is right. My kids making a mess may not be right. My spouse, my parents, far from it. Again, this is not to compare the people in the situations to Martha and Mary. Rather, again, how are we like Martha on this journey? I am convinced there are times when we approach situations and we respond like Martha. We can overfocus on the cultural norms and expectations that stifle, giving us anxiety and worry that we're not going to live up to. We can overfixate on the work and the task nagging that has to be done, feeling like we won't be able to be with Jesus until everything is just as so. And in turn, maybe my most guiltiest, we can become so indignant in these moments and disappointed with those around us that our words turn harsh and we begin accusing in a manner that ruins relationships. Jesus responds to Martha like a skilled surgeon with his words. He knows just how to say what Martha needs to hear. In verse 41, Martha, Martha, the tenderness in his voice, saying her name twice, showing love and respect. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her. Let his gentle rebuke settle into our hearts so that when we find ourselves in those moments, when we're calling out to God, Lord, Lord, tell them. May the Lord respond with, Johnny, Johnny. The Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Choose what is better, and it will not be taken from you. At this moment in our study, it's insufficient for me just to close and say, be like Mary. For some reason, it just doesn't feel right. Mary chose her path. And I, as Martha, there's still tasks that need to be done. There's still responsibilities I must tend to in my family, my work. Even with those around me, I still must find my way. Thankfully, Martha's story doesn't end here. And I don't know what happens between this story and our next in John 11. But once we get to John 11, something is different. There's evidence of some sort of change that Martha has gone through. If you will, flip over to John 11 with me. The opening to this is Jesus is a ways off, several miles. And he's received word from Martha and Mary that their brother Lazarus has died. Jesus is out of the area. He's not going to make it in time. In fact, he even stays a couple days longer. Finally, Jesus tells his disciples, let's go back to Judea. In the face of danger, a place that he had already been persecuted, and possibly being up against the odds of intervening for Lazarus, he returns. But notice Martha's heart as she approaches him. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles away from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in their loss of their brother. When Martha heard Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. "Lord," Martha said to Jesus, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" Do you see the change in Martha's heart? Martha casts off the cultural norms of that time. At this time, her brother has passed away. There would have been mourners from all over, even those that were hired to be there to provide comfort as the procession went through the city and ultimately laid her brother to rest in the tomb. But Martha casts off the custom of staying back with those. She breaks through the crowd, all of which aren't providing her comfort. She seeks out Jesus. And in that moment, she bears her heart before him. Instead of condemning the doctors, physicians, or family members who were there attending to Lazarus, she tells Jesus, "If you had been here." Do you hear the honest faith? "If you had been here, Lord." But her heart doesn't just stop there. She responds even further. "But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask for." This might sound like an obvious one, but the situation of death is beyond her control. There's no amount of work attending to the kitchen's duties or helping to ensure that family is comfortable. Martha's been broken into a place where she has to find comfort and only rely on Jesus. No amount of working or task is going to bring her brother back or change that which has happened. And at the same time, she's no longer insisting, as she did before, "Jesus, tell them." Rather, "I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." I can almost hear it in Martha's voice. "Jesus, there's people who have seen you heal the sick, make the lame walk. And if only you had been here, Lord, my brother would have been healed also. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask for." There's a sense of honesty there, still believing in the power that Jesus has to overcome even this situation. Maybe not in the manner in which she would have thought. Even as the conversation continues, she says, "I know he will rise. Surely he will rise again on the resurrection at the last day." So her hope isn't even that Jesus would intervene and raise him at this moment. What a beautiful prayer it is for us to consider, pouring out our heart to God in a lament, only to then find the comfort in, "I still believe." And if you read on in verse 27, even my favorite, she responds to him and says, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." That she would have the faith in Jesus to be able to make that profession. In those simple words, Martha takes up her yoke of discipleship. She aligns herself with Jesus that much further, hanging on to every word that he had to say that day. The change in her heart is remarkable. This is the second to last time we see her. Our last time is in the next chapter, chapter 12. We would think as we get into this next piece that it's a simple background or a setup to what comes next. And in fact, it really is. It's 2 verses. And it's overshadowed by what Mary does. But notice what Martha is doing. Notice what Martha is doing. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus arrived at Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Mary goes on to anoint Jesus. But did you catch the verse? Martha served. Jesus wasn't out to try and change who Martha was. In that moment in Luke 10, her choice to be in the kitchen and go through the preparations had nothing to do with the actions or proximity she had to Jesus. In fact, Jesus was there the entire time with her. In John 12, there she is in Jesus' company, and she's serving. Free from the pressures of expectations, free from believing that the work had to be finished before she could be with Jesus, free from the disappointment or anger towards those around her, possibly ruining her relationships. There, Martha served. For us who've walked with Jesus for some time, this is the yoke that Jesus has called us to. Called us and Martha to carry on, not in bondage or obligation, not in tradition, but in the freedom to serve, the freedom to give, the freedom to see past the circumstances, that we serve Jesus at those small little moments around our table. May we use our freedom to build others up and not tear down our relationships. And maybe you've been walking apart from Jesus, and the pressures of life have worn thin, and the choices of other family members have rubbed you wrong. Sometimes going about doing the work can seem overwhelming and alone. I'd hope you to know you're not alone. Just like Martha in that kitchen, Jesus was there. He was there in the preparations. He was there in the table. All he wants to do is a work in your heart. I'm so thankful to Bruce and Yvonne, who opened their homes to me and modeled what it meant to be on a journey like Martha's. Setting aside the resentment and issues to reflect the love and faith of Jesus. In those quiet moments around the table where love was poured out, mentoring happened, may we contemplate doing the same for others in our lives.